Hello, friends. This is Dan Carlton, founder of the Paragraph Project and Planner U. One thing that I've noticed, which I'm sure you've all noticed as well, but over the course of the 20 years I've spent in this industry, the impact window for strategy has actually gotten smaller and smaller. So it's just been shrinking over time. So when I first started working in this industry, we were developing strategies that had 3 to 5 year horizons, big brand positioning platforms that were intended to stay around for a long time. And while things have kind of changed and the pace of business has changed and the introduction of digital platforms and all that sort of stuff has come into play, that window, that 3 to 5 kind of impact window for strategy has started to shrink down to years and months and now even weeks. Like sometimes we're working on projects that are intended to develop strategies that will only really impact the next 3 to 5 weeks. So it's really gotten super compressed. What has been really important as we start to work with clients and teams around developing brand strategy is when you have a workshop that can kind of carve out 4 or 5 hours to focus on the future of the business and the future of the brand. It's a nice way to kind of pull out of the day-to-day grind and start to think about the big picture vision of the brand and where it can go into the future. So one thing I wanted to share with you is an exercise that we typically use and within these workshops where we try to get clients to start to think about where's the future of their brand, like pull their head out from the day-to-day kind of chaos that is running a lot of the decision making and start to think about, where do we want to see this brand in the future? What sort of impact do we want to have amongst consumers and in kind of the broader culture and society and that sort of thing. So I want to share with you something that I call the Newsstand exercise. So I'll go through here and start to kind of diagram out how this essentially works. What you want to do within a workshop to get people, again, to think about kind of longer horizon sort of goals for their brands and where it can go into the future is perhaps ask them to think about where they would like to see the brand 3 to 5 years from now. And a good creative exercise for that is to start to imagine a cover story of a magazine. So the way you run this exercise is pretty simple. You'll essentially just start with a flip chart. And within that, you'll just kind of draw a couple boxes here. And I'll kind of explain how to use each of these in a minute. So that's your basic framework, your template here. And the way you want to run this exercise, you break the larger group into teams of 2 or 3, and they have some dedicated time to think about if this brand were to be on the cover of a magazine 3 to 5 years down the road, what magazine would it be? What would the story be about? And you have them start to think about that and start to unpack that and describe it for you a little bit. So within this framework here, just imagine this is the cover of your magazine. You'll want to have people kind of fill out a couple different pieces of information. The first is the title of the magazine. So this could be an industry-specific magazine. It could be more of a lifestyle magazine. If you are a brand that is in the tech space, maybe it's Wired or maybe it's Fast Company. If you are in the health and fitness space, maybe it's Shape or some other title like that. But the main thing is figure out like what sort of magazine do you think is going to do the best job of representing what your brand is going to be about in the future? And then the next box underneath that is going to be the headline. So you figured out essentially which magazine you want to be featured in. And then you think about the headline. The key to the headline is 6 words or less. So as succinctly as possible, how do you start to articulate the impact that the brand is having in the world or amongst its consumers in that headline itself? What's the feature story all about at a high level? And then as you kind of move down this model here, what we typically do just to build this out and just add a little bit more dimension to it is we'll start to think about this box on the bottom left as being essentially like impact statements. So we usually have about 3 of these, right? So you have kind of bullet pointed here. What is the brand doing for consumers and in the world, and how do you articulate that as kind of a little bit of a sidebar on that cover story magazine? And then the final thing, just to add a little bit of a human touch, is some sort of like testimonial or pull quote. And that could be usually from like a hypothetical consumer. What would they be saying about the brand and the experience that it creates? It could be from an expert in the category. You can play around with that and see what works best for whatever kind of situation that you're facing and what you want that brand to become. But this is a nice little framework for starting to apply some creativity to thinking about the long-term planning for the brand, where it can go into the future, as I mentioned. And it's a very simple structure that you can take into any workshop, and it's a great way to get people, again, thinking outside of the day-to-day roles and responsibilities that they have and start to think about the long-term positioning of the brand potentially. So that's what I have for you today. I'll have a link at the bottom of this post where you can actually click through. We have a template that you can download. It's just a PDF that essentially has this model as a blank kind of template that you can use within your workshops. Or like I said earlier, you can essentially just frame it out on a flip chart and go that route as well. Either way will work just as fine. The main thing is getting people out of their kind of day-to-day, short-term, quarter-to-quarter strategic thinking and start to think about the long-term trajectory of the brand and where it can go into the future. So I hope that helps. I'll be back in a few days with some more thoughts and tips. Thank you.